This city is no longer alive. It breathes. Every morning, Marcus heard that breath through the cracks in the window, the groan of an aging bus like the lungs of a lifelong smoker, the wind whistling through glass buildings like someone suppressing a sob. Before, Marcus thought the city was just a backdrop, a large photograph where his life played the lead role. But now, the city felt like a massive creature lying heavy on everyone's chest. And Marcus was one of those being crushed. He sat still at the kitchen table, one hand gripping a cold cup of coffee, the other holding his phone. His eyes stared at the screen, but he couldn't process the words. The news flooded in like dirty water. Inflation, bankruptcy, cutbacks, layoffs, hiring freezes. Those words had become the soundtrack of his life, repeating until they sounded like a dark incantation. In the living room behind him, a child coughed, a dry cough, then another, like someone trying to force air into tiny lungs. Marcus didn't turn around immediately. He just listened. Because sometimes listening without looking was easier. Evelyn stepped out from the hallway, her hair tied back in a rush, eyes shadowed by dark circles. She wore a sweater frayed at the elbows and held a power bill folded in half. "Marcus?" She called his name so softly it didn't sound like a reproach. It sounded like someone calling to a sleeper, afraid of waking them from a bad dream. He looked up. "I'm sorry," Evelyn spoke first, as if apologizing for existing. "They sent this. It went up again." Marcus looked at the paper, then back at his wife's face. Evelyn was still beautiful, but that beauty was now coated in an invisible dust, the dust of months of lingering anxiety. He wanted to say, "I'll handle it," but the words stuck in his throat like a fishbone. He had said them too many times. "I'll call them," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. "We'll manage." Evelyn nodded, but she didn't believe him. She didn't even try to pretend anymore. She turned away, walking into the kitchen like someone entering a hospital ward. Marcus looked down at his coffee. The black surface reflected a fragment of his face. Those eyes no longer belonged to the man who used to walk confidently into the office with a shirt smelling of fresh laundry and a clear plan for the future. Now, those eyes looked like those of a man trapped in a box with no exit, left with nothing to do but count the hours. He had been laid off 3 months ago. It wasn't a sudden firing with a slammed door. It was a slow death, cut hours, reduced bonuses, then a call from HR with a voice as polite as ice. "The economic situation, you understand." Yes, he understood. He understood all too well. He understood it through his empty stomach, the bare fridge, and the sleepless nights spent listening to Evelyn turn her back to him in silence. Marcus had sent out over 100 resumes. He remembered exactly because he kept an Excel file. He had started it to be professional, but it had turned into a ledger of the dead. Company name, date sent, status. No response, no response, no response. Then occasionally a sentence as cold as a thin blade. "Thank you. However, we have moved forward with another candidate." One evening, Marcus accidentally overheard Evelyn talking to her mother on the phone. Her voice was small, suppressed, as if she were strangling herself from keeping from crying. Marcus stood in the hallway, hand against the wall, suddenly finding the plaster as cold as metal. He didn't step out. He didn't make a sound. He only retreated like a thief. From that day on, Marcus began to hear strange sounds in the house. At first, it was just a tiny click in the night, like pipes expanding. Then a rip, like paper being torn gently. He told himself, it's just an old house. But the house wasn't old. They bought it 3 years ago. The price tag Marcus once took pride in because he had made it. Now, that price was nothing but a noose. One night, lying next to Evelyn, Marcus heard it clearly. Not in the walls, but right under the floorboards. A long whisper, like someone breathing through a dry mouth. Too slow. Marcus bolted up, heart hammering. Evelyn was still asleep, her face toward the window. The streetlights cast a pale, sickly blue glow over her cheekbones. Marcus walked down the stairs in the dark. Every step creaked like a complaint. The kitchen was dark. The clock read 03:17. He stood for a moment, silent. Then he heard it again. Very close. From the mailbox sitting on the table where he usually dumped junk mail and bills. The sound of paper rubbing together. Marcus stepped forward. He opened the lid. Inside was a pristine white envelope, no stamp, no address, as if someone had placed it there without opening the door. On the envelope was a single line of handwriting in black ink. Marcus. The script was so neat it felt inhuman. He looked around. The house remained silent. No sign of entry. Marcus tore the envelope open. Inside was a thin, clean sheet of paper with no company logo. Only one sentence. Pay with what you are holding tight. Marcus read it again, trying to understand. His hands shook. What the hell? He whispered. But a voice in his head answered immediately, as if it had been waiting. What are you holding tight? He thought of money. He thought of the car. He thought of the house. But deeper, he thought of something else. He thought of his role. The provider, the reliable father, the man who doesn't break. He had held on to that image like a drowning man clutching a piece of rotten wood. But the wood was sinking, and he was dragging his whole family down with it. Marcus crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash, trying to convince himself it was a sick joke. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe a neighbor. But the next night, the envelope reappeared. In the mailbox. The same handwriting. This time, the note said, "You don't have much time left to hesitate." The third night, "We hear you counting every cent." Marcus began to lose sleep, not because he was afraid of ghosts, but because he was afraid of his own life. He went to interviews with bloodshot eyes, forcing a smile. People looked at him as if looking at an obsolete product. Can you work under pressure? Marcus wanted to laugh. He was living under so much pressure his lungs ached. But he only nodded and said, "Of course." When he returned home, Evelyn would ask, "How was it?" Marcus answered out of habit, "Fine." A single word, and it killed any further conversation. One Friday, after checking his accounts, Marcus found the remaining balance was embarrassingly low. He stood in the bathroom, looking at his face in the mirror. The white light made his skin look like it was covered in flour. He saw the gray hairs at his temples. He saw his lips pressed tight as if holding back a scream. On the mirror, a faint fog appeared. Marcus didn't remember taking a hot shower, but the mirror was fogging up anyway. And on that layer of mist, There was writing, not in ink, but as if someone had traced it with their finger. Make a choice. Marcus recoiled, his heart thudding. He turned toward the door. No one. In the bedroom, Evelyn was folding laundry. His son Liam sat on the floor, stacking wooden blocks into a tower. Liam looked up and smiled at Marcus. That smile hurt Marcus like a punch to the stomach, because the boy believed in him. That night, Marcus didn't go down to the kitchen. He lay still, eyes wide open. Evelyn breathed steadily beside him. Marcus heard the city outside. Fewer cars than before, fewer voices. Everything felt as if it were being drained dry. Then he heard that whisper, right in his ear. It wasn't clear where it came from, not from the house, but as if it were inside his skull. Do you want to save them, or save your image? Marcus closed his eyes, his entire body tensed. Cold sweat clung to his back. The voice continued, as gentle as a doctor. You've already lost, Marcus, but you can still pay the right way. Shut up, Marcus whispered. Shut up. You don't have to die, Marcus, the voice said, as if granting a favor. Just disappear. Marcus bolted upright. Evelyn startled. Marcus? What's wrong? He looked at her, looked at the woman he loved, who was being dragged into the swamp with him. In that moment, Marcus saw his life clearly as a long hallway, every door an expense, every light bulb a hope fading out. I just can't sleep, Marcus said. Evelyn looked at him for a long time. Her gaze was no longer reproachful. It was something more dangerous. Pity. You need to talk to me, she said softly. Don't carry it all alone. Marcus nodded, but his throat tightened. Because if he spoke, he would have to admit he was no longer a pillar of strength. He was just a man adrift. The next morning, Marcus woke up early, put on his coat, and went out. He didn't tell Evelyn. She was asleep, her arm wrapped around the empty pillow where he had lain. Marcus drove to the bank. He sat in his car looking at the shiny glass building. The people inside wore suits, walking as if the world were fine. Marcus felt like a ghost standing outside a party. In his pocket, his phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. No name. Only the content. Trade it for peace, so they don't have to watch you break. Marcus stared at the words until his vision blurred. A thought emerged. If I leave, they will be lighter. Not death, no blood, just disappearing from the burden. Marcus thought of Evelyn calling her mother. I'm scared I'll end up hating him. He thought of Liam a few years from now, growing up in a house full of arguments and silence, a child learning to walk softly and speak quietly for fear of his parents shattering. He opened the car door, stepped out. But the moment his feet touched the ground, Marcus heard a sound. Not a car, not a person, but a tiny laugh, like a child playing. Marcus turned his head. In the back seat of the car, Liam was sitting. Marcus froze.
The back door hadn't been locked. The boy must have snuck out while Evelyn was sleeping. He hugged an old teddy bear, his eyes bright and innocent. "Where are we going, Dad?" Liam asked. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. In his head, the voice whispered instantly, full of amusement. "Good. Now you must choose even faster." Marcus lunged to open the car door, pulled Liam out, and hugged him tight. You can't come with me," Marcus said, his voice breaking. Liam looked confused. "I just want to be with you." Those words were like a blunt knife, slower but more painful than anything else.
Marcus picked Liam up, put him back in his seat, and buckled the seatbelt with trembling hands. I'm taking you home." On the way back, Marcus drove slowly, as if carrying something more fragile than glass. When they reached the house, Evelyn rushed out, her face white, tears falling uncontrollably. "Marcus, oh my God, I woke up and the boy was gone. You were gone." Marcus stepped out and stood still. He wanted to apologize, but an apology was too small for the truth. He had intended to leave without a word. Evelyn looked at him, eyes red. "What were you going to do?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He leaned down, hugged Liam, and breathed in the scent of his son's hair, the smell of cheap shampoo and warmth. Then he said very quietly, I was going to disappear." Evelyn recoiled as if slapped, not out of anger, but out of understanding. She understood it all. She understood the black hole in his head. She understood the letters, the whispers Marcus hadn't told her about. Marcus didn't mention the envelopes or the writing on the mirror. He only said, "I thought if I disappeared, your burden would be lighter." Evelyn burst into tears, but this time she didn't turn away. She stepped forward, clutching his shirt, as if afraid he would float away. "I don't need you to disappear," she said. "I need you to stay, even if you're broken." Marcus stood there, and for the first time in months, allowed himself to truly break. He sank to his knees, his forehead rested on Liam's shoulder, his body shook with sobs he tried to swallow like something shameful, but they poured out anyway. In that moment, Marcus heard the city outside. It was still breathing. But inside the house, there was a different sound. Not a whisper anymore, but a silence, as if something were retreating. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table and, for the first time, told her everything. He spoke of the fear, the feeling of helplessness, the nights he wanted to crawl into the walls and vanish. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, she placed her hand over his. "We'll sell the car. We'll move to a smaller apartment. We'll ask for help. And you will go see a doctor, not because you're weak, but because you're being crushed." Marcus nodded. The white envelopes were still in the trash. He had thrown them away, but strangely, they weren't crumpled. They lay there like teeth. Marcus stood up, opened the bin, and gathered them all. He didn't read them again. He didn't need to. He took them to the backyard and struck a light. The small flame ate into the paper, the orange glow reflecting on his face. A faint acrid smell rose and dissolved into the cold air. Marcus watched the paper turn to ash, layer by layer falling away. In the final moment, he heard that voice one last time, no longer threatening, no longer whispering, just a sentence as cold as the wind. So, you choose to live in humiliation. Marcus looked into the ashes. Then he replied, clearly, as if speaking to himself, "Yes." He turned and went back inside. The door clicked shut. Outside, the city still breathed, but it no longer pressed against his chest as it had before, because for the first time, Marcus wasn't trying to be an invincible man. He was just a man who was alive. And sometimes, in an era of economic collapse, staying alive is the quietest victory of all.